All right, friends, this is week 5, lecture 2. It's Thursday. I kind of feel like you probably feel like this going into about week. So I thought it was an appropriate emoji, just kind of the head on the palm. Um, let me tell you guys this, you're doing great. This stuff is hard. Um, it is, it's really hard. And I fully understand that. And it feels like you have taken in too much information and it does get easier. I very much so promise you that every developer's every developer has been where you're at right now. Doesn't matter if it was Bill Gates or us or some senior developer at Google. At the beginning, everybody has been in the same position you were in. So just use that as some sort of um, like encouragement that you're not alone in that. So cool. Just want to talk about discussion posts. Again, tomorrow I'm only opening Monday and Wednesdays. Just throwing that out there. You will have a Wednesday of week 8 is when all of your stuff's going to be due, all of your assignment, your belt exam, and discussion posts. Meaning on Wednesday of week 8, we are in week 5 right now. Wednesday of week 8, I'm going to open up every discussion post. So if you did miss, last Fridays or miss something, I'm going to open up every discussion post week 8. So you do have one more chance. But moving forward, kind of like we talked about just on Fridays, I'm just opening up that week's discussions. So tomorrow, all of them will be open for all this week's week 5 will be open tomorrow if you need to make that up. Assignments, just kind of, it's a pretty simple week when it comes to assignments. Just getting used to this, so I don't even know where the assignments are at. But um, something to kind of keep in mind is next week is when you kind of start getting into quite a bit of assignments. We're going to do you have courses, you have Amazon, you have login and reg, you have the wall, and you have favorite books, and you have favorite book shell. So you got quite a bit. Or no, you don't have a favorite book shell. That's optional. Ooh, I hate that O right there. That's good to know. But you do have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you have 5 assignments next week, and next week you're prepping for your belt week. So we're going to talk through that. Kind of just some ways to prep when you're taking your belt exam, kind of some tips and tricks that I've used that I would encourage you to use as well. So that being said, rest is actually going to be one of my biggest tips, especially the night before the exam. Whenever you take it, it'll be open Friday through Sunday for you to start it. It has to be done again within 24 hours. And so being said, since it was a pretty light week, I would really encourage you to kind of start moving forward on some of these assignments. So like courses will be a great one to work on. Delete, pretty fair, pretty straightforward, pretty easy one. We're going to talk about how to pass in kind of like the 3 right here, which is the ID. We're going to talk about that today. So you should have really, this shouldn't be too much for you at all. It's just creating a form, populating a model database moving forward. Amazon's a little bit more challenging. It's just kind of redirecting. It's really the big thing. Instead of rendering on a page, you're just redirecting and having to do a few more things there. Login and registration. This is going to be a massive one. So yes, like Edgar said, these are also the final 5 assignments of the stack. So maybe, if you get to Amazon and you're like stressed, you can skip it and do it week 7 or 8, kind of up to you. I would say if you're going to do anything this next week, semi-restful TV shows validated, wildly important. You should absolutely do this one. This will be very similar to a like it'll be kind of the beginning portion to very similar of a belt exam. Make sure you do that one. Courses is cool because it teaches you delete, but if you feel comfortable, I mean, you could actually add in a delete function and you already have a delete function. So courses is okay, Amazon's okay, but I would say semi-restful TV shows, if you're really narrowing it down, login and registration is wildly important. You cannot pass the exam if you do not have a working login and registration. Just something to think about. The wall is a great one. It is a challenging one, but it's a great one. And then favorite books. I would say if you're going to do any of them, this is going to be the closest, other than Dojo Reads, which we're actually going to do together. This will be the closest thing to the belt exam. You will need a login and registration. You will have some sort of relationship. This is between a book. Maybe it's a model of a like. There's different things that you can do with that. But this is something that you will, like, this is close to what the belt exam is going to do. So I would say those three would be the most important: semi-restful, validated, login and registration, favorite books. Now we are going to walk through Dojo Reads. It's a little bit more complicated probably than your belt exam is going to be, maybe. But we're going to walk through this together. And that kind of brings me to my next point. I'm going to be doing an additional, and this is something I'd love to hear your feedback, 2 or 3 lectures next week. So what I can do is, I'm thinking for sure what I'm going to do is an extra lecture on Monday where I'm going to build out a login and registration, and walk through bcrypt, walk through all that. Then I can, for the actual lecture, kind of is up to you guys. I can walk through bcrypt, walk through a register and log in on Monday. And then coming in, we will already have that built. And then I can build that stuff on Tuesday. Then on Thursday, I can finish it and then do an optional for deploy. Or if you'd like, I can do Monday through Thursday and we do everything together and we deploy, including on one of those 4 days. So it's really up to you. I'm very much so open. If you guys want me to lecture every night next week, I can absolutely do that. Fully up to you. Can you guys put in the chat what you would prefer, if I do like a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, or a Monday through Thursday? Either way, I'll do if I do Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, then I can do an optional assignment of just how to deploy. Which one would you guys prefer? Do you want to buckle down next week? Monday through Thursday, Monday all the way through would be good. Monday through Thursday, deploy 3 or 4.
These, of course, would all be recorded. So if you can't make the optional times, you can always just rewatch them at your own time.
Yeah. Okay. So why don't we plan Monday through Thursday, and we'll reassess on Tuesday. If we're crushing it, then maybe we won't do our Wednesday and we'll have a break. But if we aren't, and if we need it, then we will do. So we will plan Monday through Thursday, same time. We're just going to do 5 to probably 6:30. Since we're doing 4, I would say it wouldn't take us 4 hours to do this entire thing. Maybe we'll do 6. We'll do 1 hour and 15 each time, and then just at 1 hour and 15, we'll stop. That way we can show that, and that it can be done within 5 hours for your belt exam. Cool. All right. I'm glad we got that fixed. I'm glad we got that figured out. I just want to make sure you guys feel like you have got the most material and you are super prepared going into this belt exam. So I want to do that for you guys to do that. But still, these will be recorded. So if you can't, or if you want to work on login and registration yourself, like, it is good to hear me lecture, but I would really encourage you, you need to do this stuff on your own, because if you just have me lecturing, it is not going to stick as much as you doing it yourself. So just keep that in mind. All right, great. Let's get into it. We talked through that. Next week, that's what we're doing. We've talked about belt prep. We're going to talk a lot on, we'll kind of set aside a couple minutes for a belt prep on maybe Tuesday. We'll walk through kind of what to expect on the belt exam, what I'm expecting for you, kind of ways to prepare. One thing I do really want to point out is it is okay if you come into the belt exam with a fully working, kind of working login and registration. That is okay. In fact, I encourage you to build out a login and registration before the belt exam, with one caveat. You don't know if you're doing a login and registration in order for it to be fully working, that's why I did that, is you have to actually migrate and create your models. You might not know what your model is. So if it's, let's say you create a user with a first name and a last name and an email and a password, the belt exam might ask you for a name and then an alias and then a email, a password, and check password, right? So it might be a little bit different. So that's why I say it's not fully working, but you have the skeleton of everything. You definitely have your views built out. You have an index view that is you've got a HTML that shows your login and registration. We absolutely need that. That is crucial. Have that pre-built. You just might not have migrated yet, because then you can walk in and change the things you need to change. If it's, say you have it built out first name, last name, but it's for its name and an alias, that's a really quick change, right? You go into your model, you change it to alias, you go into views where you're creating, you change it to alias, and then you go into your HTML, you change it to alias, and then you can migrate. Yes, you can absolutely have that. That's not cheating, and we actually really encourage it, especially for you that are really trying to get the red belt or the black belt. Okay, cool. So I want
Hey,
to talk
Will.
about, yeah, what's going on?
I'm sorry. Before we switch gears, I just wanted to bring up a question. Asked that will there be any hackathons in this cohort? And I was like, there's not any officially, but I mean, if enough people will, like, I don't know if
Yeah.
you or I would be happy to jump in, or
So
I
I
don't
know
know.
that Coding Dojo is working on a hackathon, just to throw that out there.
Mhm.
I don't know the full details about that. What we can do is maybe we could do a hackathon of maybe like week 8, depending on how many people do the exam. Maybe we'll kind of do a hackathon end of Tuesday, and then you can kind of work on by yourself. And then on Thursday, people can kind of have a couple minutes, 3 minutes, to show off what they did. If you guys want, if you're interested in something like that, I can create like hey, do a project that does this. Now, given that you pass, right, the next week you're literally building a project and you're doing kind of a hackathon. You will have 1 week to build a full project. So that basically is a hackathon, but that's going to be for portfolio, and that's in projects and algorithms. So if you are moving on to projects and algorithms next week, you're doing something like that already. So I guess in a sense, that's technically a hackathon, but it's also that's what I would say. Any other quick questions? So you will have a week of personal portfolio, like a personal project, and then you have a week of a group project. So TeamWise Hackathon, you will have a group project. You'll have 2 projects for your portfolio in projects and algorithms. So you will work as a team with somebody. You will definitely get the pains of GitHub. It will happen. You will have a merge conflict, and you will want to throw your computer through the wall. Just be prepared. Okay. If you somebody did, oh yeah, Edgar, you got it. Cool. All right, so I want to talk about this right here. So I've got this project, and this is the books and authors with templates. This is what we built yesterday. What Edgar built. I can't take credit. I need to do something real quick. I want to Python manage.py make migrations. Oh, sick. I don't know how to spell. Hmm. Let me do this real quick.
Well, Will is doing this. I just wanted to let everybody know when everybody takes your exams next week, there is an option, as is with all of your wireframes, to save the copy of your wireframe. If you take an exam and let's say you don't quite get a black belt or you don't pass it or whatever, if you have the wireframe with you after the exam is done, you can continue building it to its complete completion for several days or over the weekend, and then you will have a completed black belted uh, uh, exam in your arsenal. It won't count for a grade because you won't be able to resubmit that. But then when you go for the second one, you'll have that.
I'm fascinated. Edgar sent me a zip, and it actually sent your entire database data. I would not have expected that.
Yeah, the debut SQLite file that's in there is my entire database.
Oh, dude. Okay. Well, that's good to know. Okay, so I wanted to just talk about many-to-many relationships, and we've talked about the one-to-many. Well, let's kind of talk about the many-to-many relationship. So we've got these two models right now. I've got this model book, and I've got this model author. And the whole point, let me pull up the actual assignment real quick. That way, already did. Good for me. So here's what we created, right? We have this at localhost 8000. So just our kind of default route. We've got this page that I can add a book. And then on the side, I've got a table that I can put the title. I can view the book. I can see its ID. And I've got another page that /authors that I can add an author. I can put their first name, their last name, some notes, and I can put a name, the author's name, their ID, and I can also view the pages of either the book or the author. Now, there is a many-to-many relationship in this case for my books and my authors because sometimes it's kind of a weird thing to think about. And yes, J.K. Rowling is the only one who wrote Harry Potter, right? And she has multiple Harry Potters, but Harry Potter has one author. But if you think just from a general perspective, like a big, maybe like a college science book is not typically written by one person. It typically has quite a few people, or C++ for dummies. That's a great thing. Typically it's either edited by and they have their name, or maybe they write a different section. And so in this case, a book can have many authors because we just want it to be all inclusive, right? We don't want to create a website that only is for authors that, they're the only ones that write the book. We want to make sure we have a website that if there are multiple authors, that's okay. So we've got this many-to-many relationship, meaning a book can have many authors, and also an author can have many books. Now, just like our one-to-many, we have to create what we call a foreign key, or basically it's a primary key. It connects it together. And we did for a one-to-many, we did models.foreign key, right? Here with a many-to-many, we don't do that. Instead, all we do is we say models.many-to-many field. Now, we still kind of have the same attributes. If you think about back to the one-to-many, we still had this attribute right here, my books. We still have this related name that acts as this kind of ghost attribute on this related class, right? And that acts like a doorway into my author class from my book. And we have, well, what class does this one have a relationship with? So it has a lot of the same things. One thing you might notice is we are missing the on cascade. And the reason is if you guys remember, in a one-to-many, we said, okay, if the teacher who had many students, if they leave, well, then we just want to delete all the students, right? It's if the one side of the one-to-many gets deleted, just get rid of everything else. In this case, we don't want that. Right. So maybe there is a book and two authors wrote it, and then they have a falling out and one pays them to get their name off the book. Well, we don't want to just, if we delete that author, delete the book as well, because of the other authors sitting and saying, well, wait a second, I'm still the author of this book. I want it to stay. So when we create a many-to-many field, there's two things. It can go on either one of these classes. It wouldn't have mattered whether it was author or whether it was book. But it does have to go on whatever class you pick. It has to go it has to be the second class. What do I mean by that? If I were to do this, right? My computer reads code top to bottom. So here it's going to say, okay, I've got this class author, and it's got a first name, a note, a last name, a notes created at and updated at. And then it's also got this attribute called my books that is a many-to-many field, and we're referencing this class book. Now, what my computer is going to do is it's going to say, wait up, hold up, because it hasn't read book, because it goes top to bottom and says, I don't know what that is. There's going to be an error. So if I was writing this, right, and I wanted it to be be a many-to-many, I would have to put the many-to-many on whichever one is below. So in this case, it would be, right, like my authors or whatever. Does that make sense? because it has got to be established first before this class has got to be established before the many-to-many field is generated. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, because if I were to do, let's pretend this is gone. If I were to do this, then again, it's saying, oh, it's related to this class book, but it hasn't read book yet because it goes top to bottom. Although we know book is right here, let's say you have a ton of classes, it might not know that. And so it might just say this is a break. So make sure that when you are doing many-to-many, it doesn't matter which one you do it on, just make sure that it is on the one that is below that one. Cool. Now, kind of walking through what we did, we have a working project, right? We have a title, we can add a description. So here I can see for dummies. Don't learn this language. It's literally the worst. Cool. So if I press add, is my server running? Yeah, it is. If I press add, it automatically goes here. So let's walk through what just happened. So if I go to my HTML, I've got my templates. Now I've got my index, and this is where my file is, right? And so this is my form. And we did do something called a named route yesterday. Now, I just really want to point this out. Somebody had asked to do a named route. This is what we did. This is the same thing as if I were to put create book. Right, they're doing the same thing. So if you see this, I don't want you to think like, well, I don't understand, what is this URL? Basically, in our views, what we did is we created these named routes, or sorry, in my URLs, we created these named routes, and so I could just access it that way. It's just a trick you could do, but you don't have to. But if we're really looking at this, okay, so it's going, let me go back to my code. So it's going, it's just basically saying, go find this URL with a name of create book. So then it's going here and it's finding create book, right? It finds this name, it's this path, and then it says go into my views, and I want you to import, because we imported it up here. Again, you don't have to do this. You can use it the way that we've been typically doing it, but the same pathway kind of is happening, right? It's going and it's finding in views, it's finding this create book. So let's head to my views. This here. I'll find my create book. It's right here. Now, here's one thing I do want to point out. This is not, you don't have to do this for your belt exam. I would really encourage you to do this for your belt exam. But we can, if a user is doing this, right? If we say our user actually wants to, it knows that we can do create book. It knows somehow that that is the method that we create a book on. What they can do is sometimes, if we're not careful, we can kind of inject some sort of code, right? So maybe they say like first or title equals, and then maybe it's some sort of code that could actually do like a SQL injection. It can do something to our database. So one way we can protect that, because if I click this, right, where I say title is Java sucks, sorry, Edgar. If I do this, does anybody know what type of request this is? If I just create this URL, I'm nothing with my form. If I just create, it's a GET request, right? Absolutely. So one thing we can do to protect ourselves from somebody just putting some information in the URL is, before my method is even started, before I can even do anything, I just say, hey, if this is a post, well, here's what I want to do. If it's not a post, right? Basically, you can kind of think about it as just saying like else, which we don't have to do, but because of indentation, but else if it's not, so if it is a get one, then actually I just want to redirect here. I don't want them to be able to do anything in my database. I don't want them to be able to create anything unless the type of request that I'm receiving is a post request. Now, if I click something on my form and I submit on my form, right, it is a type post. My request will come through. It'll check, is the request, is the method post or get? If it's post, okay, cool. I want you to go ahead and create it because I know it comes from my form, not somebody in the URL trying to do a get request. Does that make sense? A lot of programming is really just how can we protect and make it harder for hackers. Notice I didn't say impossible. And when we get to bcrypt and we get to hashing and insulting our passwords, it's not foolproof, but it is really hard for hackers, almost to where they won't give up because of computational power. But that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to continue to slow hackers down or slow different kind of people that want to mess with our database. Yes, Casey, exactly right. There's no such thing as hack proof. Rip to SolarWinds. Okay, so when we press submit, it checks if it's type post. And I would, again, I would really suggest that you start doing this. It's a very easy if check. One thing to notice, and I want to make sure you guys see, is remember, if we're in our if check, our return is indented, right? Now, if you don't do this, then nothing is going to happen because your if check's going to do some stuff, but it doesn't return anything and you're going to get an error. So if this was like here, right? Or if you just have this, that's going to be an error. And you're like, what? Or that's not an error. It doesn't do anything. It's not returning you anywhere. You're just going to say, well, what? I don't know what to do. It's going to create this book, but it's just going to sit there and you're going to say, I don't understand. So that's a really common error. So make sure that you guys realize, again, if it's within the if, this is indented. The thing that's outside of that means that it did not go into the if check. Make sense?
Although I was going to actually add and say, just because of the specific instance, the opposite, because it is a return. Since they're both redirects are doing the same thing, we can actually get rid of line 15. Once it creates the object, it'll exit the if and continue on and the rest. But if that redirect, we wanted to do something different, then we certainly want it in there. So like if that redirect was going to, yeah, exactly, take us to show book, then we definitely want it in there so that it does that upon completion.
Yeah.
The way that I wrote it, since they're both redirecting the same place, we can get rid of line 15. After the if check, it'll still redirect to the same place. But that's just more optimization.
And typically what you won't do, like you won't go to the same place.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You always, if a user is trying to do something, you send them to the front, right? The main index page. Casey asked out of two, which is the best practice. I would say this is the best practice because you typically won't go to the same spot. Editor's correct. Because they were the same, in theory, you're going to the same place, so it doesn't really matter. But, you know, think about Facebook, right? I always use Facebook. If I log in, it takes me to my dashboard, right? It doesn't take me back to the login page. It doesn't take me to Facebook's homepage. It takes me to my dashboard. So typically when you're doing a method, especially like creating something, like if we're looking at this, I would probably, just how I think, I would probably, if I created a book, I would instantly send it to, you know, kind of the book's description or something like that. But both will be
Mm-hmm.
both are technically fine. But I would say this is
Yeah.
like a unique edge case.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, I agree with Will, and this will make more sense when we talk about login registration later.
100%. Cool. So I'm creating my book. Where we've done this before a million times, where you do book.object.create, where we pass in title and whatever title is, because title is from my model, right? And its value is whatever's in my form at title, which is here, right? And then my description is whatever's in my form with the name of description here. Cool. So I've got that going on. Now there's something unique that I can do, and it's this view thing. Now, I kind of want to talk about this. And if you see in my bottom left, Edgar, I don't know if you can
I
annotate
got you.
what I'm trying to show, but in the bottom left of my screen, you can actually see that it says localhost, comma, or /books/1. Now, if you are kind of using your context clues, the ID of Harry Potter is 1. And then if the ID of Brave New World is 2, and then it goes 2, 3, 4. So what we can kind of assume is that this is going to books/ID. So let's actually look at how we did that in the code. So here, I've got this table, and that's just what we created. That's what you saw on the side. And before that, we are showing our index.html. And I just want to point out this. I am, in my context, I have books, and books equals book.objects.all. Now, you could just put this here if you wanted. They do the same thing, but both work just fine. There's not necessarily a better way to do it. I know that some people like, I think Edgar, it makes more sense for him to do this. That's okay. It's not really doing anything from like a space complexity. You're creating a variable, but it's only living for a method, so you're pretty fine.
And to be
But
completely honest, the reason I coded it this way is because I was going to do all of the business for the I was seeing that far ahead for the sensei bonus. I was actually going to do it right here. So I was going to say, since I already have my book saved to a variable, I can run it through a for loop here, and then I can go ahead and do an if statement later. So
yeah,
that's where that thought process
I
came
don't want
through.
to get too ahead. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. No, you're good. You're good. I just don't want to get too ahead on that. So in my context, I've got this key of books, and its value is books, but we know that is book.objects.all. Okay. So here in my table, we said that we're going to have an ID, we're going to have a title, and this is an action. This is a table header. That's what you'll see at the top, right? And then in my body, what I'm doing is I'm iterating through this entire list of dictionaries, right? And every single time for every single dictionary that I have, I'm going to create a row. And in that, I'm going to have some table data that is the ID and the title. Now, one thing that is important is in that view, we also have this TD here, this table data here. Now, when we want that to be a link, all we do is we put that in an A tag. Now, I'm going to rewrite it about how, I would typically do it, but this is one way to do it as well. I'm actually just going to go like this. Oops. And I'm just going to comment that out. So one way to do this would be to go to whatever show book. Now you saw, I think it was just book / some ID, right? Now I know that I'm iterating through and I have access via this book to my dictionary, to this object of book, to this model. So what I can do here is I can actually use this same sort of thing and say book.id. So now what this is passing is it's passing this value. And so when it goes to my URLs and it's looking for some books / some int, right? Some ID, that is a way that I can pass it that ID. Pull that up. Right here. So it's looking for books / ID. I can say, this is a reference. So it's going to take me somewhere. It's an A tag. Where is it going to take me? It's going to create a link that is books. And then right now is this ID number. So the specific book, right, that I'm talking about. So then once somebody clicks this, it goes to my URLs. It finds the path of books and book ID. It goes to show book in my views, and then it does whatever show book does. Now to kind of walk through what Edgar did, because he used named versus just kind of normal. Again, somebody asked him to do that. If you wanted to do this, if you find this easier, that's okay. There's not a better way to do it, in my opinion. It is what it is. If you want to pass in a variable, it's a little bit different though. Instead, you actually use book ID. You create this variable, whatever you want it to be named, but it has to just be named, same thing here. right? So these have to be the same. And then its value, instead of doing kind of the curly braces, because we're in this Django templating engine bracket with percentage signs, you can just call book ID. And that again is the same value. So it's two ways to do it. Again, it's totally up to you, whatever is easiest for you. This to me makes more sense because that's just how my brain works. If this makes more sense to you, good on you. It doesn't necessarily matter. They're doing literally they're doing the exact same thing. They're doing the same thing. So totally up to you. Any questions on that?
I kind of have a question.
Yeah, hit me with it.
So why is this the only one? Like when I'm looking at all of the other URLs that we're passing through, this is the only one that we have to actually put that book ID in there, and the others we don't.
Yeah, because we're saying that this pathway is expecting books, and this, real quick, just to highlight some stuff. This show book is referring to show book, right? And so with show book, it says, okay, show book's got a path of this. Now my path needs to have an integer. It has to have some number in order for the path to work. Now there's not another way because we used a name route, because it's just the name here. There's not another way to pass and make sure you get that info other than creating this variable book ID and setting its value to whatever we want. In this case is the book ID. There. The same thing happens with author ID, right? If we do a named path, it looks the same thing, but instead of show book, it's show author. But when we look at create book doesn't have any sort of anything in there. Right? It doesn't need, like, these two paths are dependent upon a number being passed through. If you don't pass a number through, an integer, if you don't do that, this path won't work. So because these are the only two that are fully dependent on us receiving an integer after books and after authors, we have to give that information there. And then that's why we have to name this the same so it can connect it, book ID to book ID.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
Again, named routes is not something that you have to do on your exam. If you wanted to do it this way, like this to me makes more sense. Again, my little brain, that makes more sense to me. Totally up to you. Cool.
Yeah. If anything about main routes, I would say it doesn't really make a lot of sense in personal projects because things won't change too much as you build them. But if you do get into group projects, like in projects and algorithms, and things may or may not change, there might be multiple apps, it may make more sense because things might change. And instead of going through all your HTMLs, you can just have one name, and regardless of how it changes, it will always be that. So up to you. That's why it's extra.
Yeah. Cool. So whenever we click that, it takes us to the show book. So let's go to my show book. Now, this is something that's really important. And this is kind of what I really want to talk about. Is we still have access to this book ID from here. Right. And so what we can do to make sure we see, remember, the whole point of the page is to see that book and its information. You can still see that our URL is book / some number, some integer. We want that specific book. What we do is then we say, okay, this book. Now this can be anything. If you wanted it to be unicorn, it could be whatever. It just is a way that we can keep track of the specific book that we're talking about. And then we run this book.objects.get, which is a built-in method, right? Where the ID matches whatever ID is being passed through. Again, this comes from here. This book ID comes from here. That comes from this comes from my A tag that we just talked about. And then this goes here, which now that gets me my specific book in my database. And again, the ID is the unique identifier. So that's something we want to make sure that we are doing. And then I'm also saying all authors either equals author.objects.all, because on my page, what I actually want to do is I want to be able to have authors, but I also want to, you see this kind of form here, right? And what this form is doing is it's saying, I want to be able to add an author to this specific book. And this is really the part of many to many that I want to walk through. So if we're looking at this form, so let's go, it goes to showbook.html, right? So I have this book and I have all authors. So I have access to that information in my context. I passed it through. So now if I go to showbook.html, there's a few things going on here. I've got my book.title. We know that. That's this book. That's in context. That's good. Then I've got the book ID, because that's what we said. We wanted to make sure that we have the book ID. We have the book description. Then what we're doing, and this is the big key, we are keeping track and we know what book it is by this word, by this key of this book, right? That comes right here. Now we talked about in my model, I have got access to this ghost attribute, if you will, this attribute right here called my authors. What my authors does, because this is a list, because you can have many, right? More than one. This gives me a list of all of the authors associated to my book, which is different than the one-to-many, right? Because it was just one, but this is a list of authors. And so what we have to do is here, if I want to show all of the authors associated to my book, I have to iterate through my list. So I say for my author, now this can be anything. If you wanted this to be unicorn, absolutely. In this book, which again comes from context. So that specific book, and not only that specific book, but all the authors associated with that specific book, again, comes from this, which is the related name. And then I'm going to get all of them. I want all of the authors. I don't just want one. I want all of the authors. And so I'm iterating through all the authors associated. And when I do that, I have access now via this word right here. I can utilize any attribute of the author. So the first name, the last name, the notes, the created at, the updated at, anything you want. ID doesn't matter. And then I iterate through, I end my for loop, and now I can show, if I look here, I've got my author J.K. Rowling and my author J.R.R. Tolkien. Are there any questions on that? I know that that's kind of a newer concept. But again, if I don't have the .all here, that returns me a list. Can't do anything with that. So I have to say the .all in order to get my entire list, and I have to iterate through if I want to see the author's name or last name, first name or last name. Any questions on this? So far, so good. Anybody else have a question? How you feeling on this?
Drop a 1 in the chat. Drop a 0 in the chat.
Yeah.
Point 2.
So I got a 1, a 1. Okay. Some ones. Good. Okay. So now, again, what we want to be able to do is I want to add an author to my book. And where the Sensei bonus, I think we're going to talk about in just a bit. So I don't really want to talk about that now. So if you see the code, we'll get back to it. But what that tells me is if I'm adding, then I am sending some sort of information. Therefore, I need a form. Okay. And so here I've got a form, and this is just called add author. Its method type is post. This class, if you're wondering, he just used Bootstrap. So you don't have to have that. It's just like a quick, that's why it looks like, kind of the button looks nice and it looks kind of nice. It's just Bootstrap, but that's what that class is doing, is it's just form group. It's just Bootstrap code. You don't have to do that. Got my CSRF token here, but now let's actually look at the views as we do this. So if I'm adding an author, there's a few things I have to do with a many-to-many. In order, and if we remember and think about our many-to-many, I'm just going to do this so that way I can draw for a second. If I've got this table that is book, right, and I got an ID and some sort of information, and I've got a table that is author, got an ID, some sort of information, and then I've got a many-to-many key. The thing that connects these two, and you've got to remember, like, just, I know it's kind of hard to visualize and conceptually see, but it creates this third table with a many-to-many relationship. Does anybody remember what goes in this table? Yeah, both IDs. So this table holds the book ID and the author ID. So basically what happens, let's say I have author 7. Let's say their ID is 7 and this is book 3. I want to add these two together. What it will do is it will create this relationship. You have a create some sort of ID. Let's say 9. And say it's the 9th one. And this will have this book ID and this author ID. This is what associates them. And so when we are adding something to a many-to-many, so if I want to add an author to a book or a book to an author, I have got to have two critical pieces of information. What are they? In order for me to make this table, yeah, I have to have both IDs. I have to. If I don't, then I don't know how to do that. So if I'm doing this and I'm thinking through, and this is a reason I want to talk about it, is it looks a little creative, but I just kind of wanted to overall think about why we would do it this way. If I have to have both IDs, but I'm looking and I really have access to my author and I do have access to my book ID, but how would I do that in my form? There's a really cool trick with many that you can do is I can create this hidden input. Now my user never sees that. My user never sees the hidden input. They can't create a value. They can't do anything. It's just a hidden input. And it's a way that developers can pass some sort of information that they know that they're going to need. In this case, we've talked about, I need both IDs, right? And I'm iterating through in my form. I'm iterating through all my authors. So I know that I have access to my author ID, but I need to make sure that my form also has my book ID. And so what we did is we created this hidden input. Again, my user doesn't see it. And its value is actually this book.id. Again, this book comes from my context right here. Because I had access to it, I can pass from my form the ID of my book. And I just call it book ID. And then I create a select dropdown. And then I say for author and authors, this is my, I'm going to just get rid of that for right now, but that's the Sensei bonus. And then each option, the value that I'm passing is the ID. But that wouldn't be good information for my user because my user doesn't know if J.K. Rowling is ID 1 or 12, right? So what they see is just the first name and the last name of my author. So when they click submit, they click on the author that I want, looking at their names. What my form is now sending at the name of author ID, input name of author ID, and book ID, it's sending over two values. First one is the book ID. Second one is the author ID. Okay, so let's look and see what we do with that information. Now, adding something to a many-to-many is pretty easy. We have access to both my book ID and my author ID, so I go ahead and throw those in variables. Now, again, these variables, you could replace it. Like if you didn't want to do book ID or author ID, you could just put your request.post information here. That's doing the same thing, but this is cleaner code, kind of makes a little bit more sense. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So creating this book ID, its value is whatever is passed in my form with the name of book ID, which we know is this book.id. The author ID equals whatever is in my form at the name of author ID. We know is right here. The value is the actual ID. So what I do is with that information, I actually do a query to my database and I create this book and this author. And all I do there is I just do a get by ID, right? So I go into my database, I say, hey, I have this ID for a book. I need you to go in there. I need you to give me that exact book that matches this ID. And I need you to do the same thing with this author. My database says, okay, great, perfect. We're going to do that. I have now the specific author in the specific book. And this is the magic join. This is what we do to join them together. It's very simple. But let's walk through it. Here, I have got this book dot my authors. Again, this book, or because we're on the book side, I've got my authors. This book references here. This is this book. That is not, I just want to really hammer because I just kind of made it seem like they were connected. This is not connected to this. It's this right here. They just happen to be the same name. So if I were to call this one book, then it would be one book dot my authors. What I'm saying is in my book, I've got a list of authors and I want you to go ahead and add this author. Add this to my many-to-many, my list of authors, and then that's it. And then now I redirect. Where do I want to go? I want to go back to the same page I was at, which has my ID. So I have to make sure that I pass it through, but I have book ID there. So then I can pass it through. Any questions on how to add in a many-to-many? I see a little bit of glossed over look, so let's walk through this. Are there any questions?
It's funny because I'm for some reason still having an issue with getting the second part of adding to work. Like I can get the first part of like adding, author or book in the first page of this project. But for some reason, when I try to do the same thing in the second part of it, it just, I don't know what I'm doing or what, I mean, I feel like I'm missing something somewhere that I just can't find, and it's just not wanting to work. It keeps giving me like different errors. Like every time I try to tweak it, I get a different error.
Okay. So if we think about it, I have access, and this is actually something we discussed yesterday. Other than the redirect, if I'm adding a book or I'm adding an author, I'm actually doing the exact same thing. Now this method, I'm adding an author to my book, therefore I redirect to my book. But when I say add book, if you really look, they're doing the exact same thing, right? And generating all this information, and then I'm saying this book dot my authors dot add. Let me pull this up right here. Here, if I'm on the other side, let's say I'm on my author page, because there's an author page and I want to be able to add a book, we do the same exact thing. If I want that, what I do is I say this author, which again comes from right here, that's doing the same exact thing. But now I'm using the attribute on my author side, which my books generates a list of books that the author has. My book is, if you were going from your author, then you utilize my books to add. If you were going from your book side, then you're utilizing the related name, which is my authors, right here, and then you do add. So it's just, again, if you're adding from the author side, then you're doing my books. If you're doing from the book side, then you do my authors. Does that clear up any sort of confusion?
It does clear it up. I just have to go back and see, I guess, make sure I'm using the right relationships in the form to
Yeah.
get it to pass properly.
Yeah, because if you look at this, this author is basically its value is just an author object, right? An entire dictionary, but it's an object of my author class. And so if that's the case, I have access to all of my attributes from my author. In this case, that's why I use my books. On this side, and I use this book. Now, in theory, I could have said this author, my books, books. This would have done, and then this book. They do the same thing. It doesn't necessarily matter, right? Because it's a many to many side, kind of in the same way that it doesn't matter if I have it on this model or this model, this class or this class, as long as obviously, right, it's the second class. It doesn't necessarily matter. The same way it works when you're adding. If I were to do this, even though I'm in my add author, this will do the exact same thing to a T. But I just went through my author, therefore I had to utilize my books. And then I passed it a book. On the other side, if I wanted to do this book, I would pass it my authors. I would add, what would I add? The author to my authors. Does that make sense? Oh, sounds weird.
And that one was my fault because I noticed that we were running above 2 hours. So when I started copy pasting and changing, I just went really fast. So I do apologize on that.
No, all good. Okay. So, let's keep going. We just got a couple more things I kind of want to walk through with this code. Now we did something, it's kind of the same thing. So what's kind of cool is these 2 pages literally are basically doing the same thing. Now we're getting a different class, right? We're getting our authors instead of our books, but the code is exactly the same, right? But instead of like book.id, I'm doing author.id. Instead of book title, I'm doing author name, but kind of the logic is doing the exact same thing, even down to the adding a form. They're kind of doing the same thing. So that allows us to, whenever we are doing code, it allows us to kind of reuse some of our code. And so what Edgar did is if I, let's see, I want to show author and show book and put them side by side. But if I'm looking, I'm kind of doing the same exact thing, right? I got my body here. I've got a title, this book, this author. I've got an ID, this book ID, this author ID. I've got a description. I got a note. I'm iterating through all of my authors. I'm iterating through all of my books, utilizing again the same sort of way. If I'm going through my author, instead of using .my authors, I do my books because that's on my author side. .all, and this is a way that I can iterate through all of my books. What's kind of nice is we can do actually the same things on both sides. Now, again, we have to make sure that we have the right side and we have stuff in the context. We have stuff on the right side. One thing I want to know is there was a sensei bonus. And what that sensei bonus asked is have the drop-down menus, so both of them, only include authors or books not yet associated with the given book or author respectively. Meaning if the author is already associated with the book, Django already makes it to where you can't like keep adding an author. It's just like a one and done kind of deal. But if it's already there, I don't want that on my list anymore. And we came up with a cool kind of workaround that this would be more of a black belt thing. So just throw this out there. Came up with a cool kind of workaround. Is in my code, I'm iterating through all of my authors, right? And all authors. My entire list. And then I just have this if check. And I say if author, so this author, right? I have this author object. If that is not in my list of this book.myauthors.all, if that doesn't already exist, then I want to go ahead and show the author's name and pass in their value and ID. If they're not, or if they are in there, well, you can notice I actually don't do anything, meaning I don't want you to see that. You don't need to, I don't need my user to see that. I only want to see the authors in my dropdown that are not in this list. Again, this list generates all of the authors that are already associated with this book. I do the same thing when I do the show author, but if book not in this author.mybooks.all, then I want to go ahead and show the book. If the book's not in, is not already associated, go ahead and show it. If it is associated, I don't need you to do anything because I don't have an else. So, any questions on that? Has this been helping? Kind of just walking through this code? Okay. Cool. Now, from this, basically, that is books and authors with templates. We pass stuff into context if we need it. You know, if we have our author ID, I can get my author, right? And then I can get all my books and generate that passing. Remember, if you want something to be able to be shown on your HTML, if it's not in session, then you have to put it in a context. Now, context could be unicorn if you wanted, but context, just use the word context because that's a good naming convention. I don't know that there's anything else. I really wanted to make sure we walked through many to many. Anybody else have any other questions? One thing I do want to note too is if we are redirecting, if we want to call the ID, which is just this variable here, just this value, you do have to do an F string in Python. So I really want to point that out. This is a way that now, once I add a book, once I click add book on my authors, it takes me back to that same exact page, but you would see a new author. So let's actually go ahead and test this out. Let's go to, what is it, authors? Let's do this. If I create a book, make sure my, well, it has to be running. Java sucks. Actually doesn't. I'm teaching Java soon, but it's pretty dope. Actually, not the worst. So if I add this, it instantly goes because we have my table, right? And remember, my form goes to my URL. My URL goes to some method. Then my method redirects because it is a post method. It is some sort of redirect. In this case, it redirects back to the normal one. To my index. It goes back to my URLs, finds index, back to my views, re-establishes this book.objects.all, puts it into context. Very, very fast. And then I have access. That's why when I create something, I instantaneously see it. Now, if I look at Java sucks, its description is actually not the worst. This is the ID. I've got this, J.R. Tolkien and J.K. Rowling. If I want to add an author, I click it. I can add an author. But now if you see my dropdown, J.R.R. Tolkien is no longer there. I can add J.K. Rowling. And now I can add, it's just empty because we didn't have validations. Okay.
I had a quick question from the DMs. I just wanted to ask. Someone asked, how difficult would it be to use sessions instead of a couple lines of code? I wouldn't use session for a lot of this because session belongs to the user, like me specifically, or Will specifically right now using the website. Even though that's technically persistent, if it goes to a different person, it would be different. So usually you want to save stuff in your database so that you can keep calling it. Session would more be used for things that are temporary. Like if you log in to a thing, that would be your session. And we will actually learn that when we go into login registration on Monday. And that's what we would use session for mainly.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm trying to find, there's somewhere in here that you can send security. Nope. There's somewhere that you could actually see your session.
I believe it's a network. I don't know. But what happens is the session tie into
Oh, yeah.
cookies.
Anyways, no, what we'll typically do for session is whenever we log in a user, what we'll do is we'll put that ID in session, but that will be, we're going to walk through that with login and registration. Absolutely.
And in regards to cookies, I don't believe session ties into cookies. Cookies, I believe, are like data files that are stored on your local machine, and that's how it's able to remember things, where session just kind of happens in the server itself. In which case, that's why you can block cookies, because you can stop them from saving or storing things on your local machine, and that's why you can delete cookies. But even with cookies blocked, you can still log into Facebook and use that session.
Yeah, session does, it lives on both the server and the browser, but so in that way it's kind of like cookies, but it is a little bit different. And like I said, typically you would either use session or like a JSON web token. We'll do that.
Like if you, oh, I'm sorry, no, that's not important.
Okay. Yeah, there's one thing I do really want to just walk through real quick. Because I just want to make sure that we can kind of walk through this and make sure that we are set up going into next week. One thing I do want to point out is I want to talk about restful routing and what that means. Sorry, friends. Not routing. I think it's just the semi-restful routing. Am I blind? Can I just not see it? In the mini putting everything together. Yeah. Maybe I'm blind. I can't see it. Okay. Just this idea of routing, I do want to point out. Now there's a great one called Semi-Restful TV Shows, and it practices restful routing. Does anybody know what restful routing actually is or why we do it? Okay. Well, that's why we're talking about it. So there's a few things going on. So with the semi-restful TV shows, the reason we call it semi-restful, let's actually talk about restful and then we'll talk about semi-restful. Restful routing is really just a way to organize your routes. So meaning, and this is pretty standard, it's a way to categorize your URLs, right? That way you don't have just a bunch of random URLs. Let's say that I'm looking at shows. Well, what I would do when I'm creating my routes is here I would have maybe /shows, and that would be all of my shows. And if I wanted to create a new one, it's shows/new, shows/create, shows/ID. If I wanted to get the specific show that has an ID. Yeah, like I said, shows would just be your general one. If I wanted to edit, I would say shows/ID edit. The whole idea behind restful routing is it's a way to categorize everything we're doing with shows. Is that we, if we are doing something with a show, we can categorize it by having shows at the beginning, and that way we know that all of my methods and everything that I'm doing starts with shows, and it's a way to categorize basically where our routes are, what our routes are doing, or what this specific, instead of having like TV or new, right? Or create as one, even though we might just be creating a TV application. If I just have create, I'm creating what? What am I creating? But when I do show/create, it tells me, oh, okay, this is a creation of a show. It's a way that we want to make sure that whenever we're setting up our routes, they make sense. Again, if I'm creating a show, I can do show create. If I'm editing, I know I need to have an ID, and then I can build upon it. So, right, if I'm starting all shows, I start the shows. If I want to get a specific show, I do shows/ID. If I want to edit a specific show, I do shows /ID/edit. I want to update, shows ID update. If I want to destroy or delete, shows ID delete or destroy. You can see how it kind of builds upon each other. But if I'm looking at your code, say you write this code and I see this, I know what every route is doing. I know why a user would go to this route. If the user is going to this route, that is showing that they want to edit their show, or they want to destroy their show, or they want to get all the shows. And so that's what that's what RESTful routing is. So like you can actually, it's just a very popular concept. It is kind of a standard, especially used in many different languages to create efficient reusable routes. Aims to map HTTP methods, which are our request, right? Get, post, patch, and delete. Patch is like our edit. And CRUD applications together in a conventional pattern. So this is just a really great way to continue to, and you can see it here, to do your URLs. Now this looks different because it's got the dots, but that's the same thing as our like int when we have the 2 carets. The reason it's called semi-restful is because one thing you might notice is here, I have got this index. Ooh, that's a bad color, sorry. This is my last thing I've gotten, unless anybody's got a question. I got this index right here that is /object. But I also have this create here that is /object. Now in other languages, like something like Mern and Java, is Java this way too, Edgar?
You can use decorators, yeah.
Yeah. You can do the same path, and what the actual language or the program or framework will do is it will say, oh, if it's a GET request, this is where I need to go. With this path, it'll receive this path. It'll check what kind of request method it is. If it's a GET, it'll go here. If it's a post, it'll go here. Now, Django, you can't do that. That's why we call it semi-restful. Django will not figure out if it's a post or a GET request. Therefore, you have to be specific with, instead of index object, you would do object/create. Right? You have to be specific because you can't just do object. Django will get confused, or actually what it will do is it will just go to this first one and you'll never create anything. Any questions on routing? I hope this helped you guys as it kind of just to really, oh, this is C#. I love that. I hope that this kind of helped bring some things together. I know that we're just kind of talking through already written code. And normally I love to write code with you guys, but I hope this helped. Did this help? Cool. That's all I have, friends. We talked through kind of everything that I wanted to talk to, things that I thought were maybe missing. That I really wanted to hit a little bit. I've written RESTful routes, but we haven't gone into why we do RESTful routes. We haven't really gone into many-to-many. So I really wanted to just hammer that in, show you the cool little way to do a sensei bonus, potentially a black belt bonus. So cool. Well, other than that, friends, I don't have anything for you. Somebody asked, focus on semi-restful TV shows, author, and books, and we will pass the exam. Probably not, my friend, if I'm being totally honest with you. Absolutely not, actually, because you have to do a login and registration. If you don't have a login and registration, you won't pass. So favorite books, if you do favorite books, that is the one. Yeah, validation, you will have validation. We talked about that last week, but yes, there will be some validations on your exam. Again, it'll look just like this. Let me go to Jojo Reads. I'll bring this up a little bit. It'll literally look not exactly like this, but this will be what your exam looks like. You'll have a register, see how this is name and alias. If you have first name, last name, that's kind of what I was talking about. Or there will be stickers that say validation should work on the register and login part. Now we'll give you the validation. So, name can't be less than 3 or whatever. Then you will have some sort of display the latest 3 reviews. Book.title is linked to the book's individual page. It'll give you information that, kind of, oh, this is book.title is linked to this page. So if I wanted to do this, this is an A tag, takes me to my book. This would be the one. This is hard. This is a challenge. This is probably more than your belt exam. It's a pretty challenging one. But this is really, really crucial. And what we're going to talk about on Monday is we're going to talk about bcrypt, and we're going to talk about login and registration. We're just going to only talk about validations, unique validations, login and registration, how we would create that. That's all we're doing on Monday. Actually, I already have it all built out. I was going to talk about it today, but I'm glad we talked about this stuff. I don't have it all built out, but I have like my model built out. So we will do that. That way we will move forward there. And then on Tuesday, we will get onto, we'll probably take, we'll be able to do 2 days. And yeah, we probably won't need Wednesday. Maybe with deployment. I don't know. We'll see. Cool. All right, friends, get some sleep, get some rest. If you can this weekend, just like Edgar said, there are already videos. So if you want to work ahead, there's videos with login and registration that you can do here. Login, registration, validations with Zach. He's great. So is Sal. Sal's a genius. There's these two that you already have access to. So, all right, friends. Well, I hope you have a great night, unless there's any other questions. Okie doke. Well, I will get this up as soon as I can, and we will see you Monday, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. Sorry.